Hello, and welcome back to the Freight Flow Advisor Brief, a podcast where we break down what's actually moving the freight market. Now, all of this is so you can make better decisions in your network and your portfolio. Today's episode is about a turning point, specifically in Savannah, Georgia, at the Savannah port. You see, in mid-July of 2026, the Georgia Department of Transportation is opening the Brampton Road Connector. This is a $126 million 4-lane trucks-only highway that links the port of Savannah's Garden City Terminal Gate 3 directly to Interstate 16 corridor in Atlanta. In other words, trucks no longer have to fight their way through local streets and rail crossings to get from the port to the interstate. They get a clean, controlled, high-speed lane from the ship to the wider U.S. highway network. State and port officials are very clear about the goal. They say this connector will give truck drivers faster access to the Port of Savannah and a more streamlined route to inland markets. It will also remove at-grade rail crossings and truck traffic from local neighborhoods. On its own, that's a nice win for truckers and residents. But this road is actually the final piece of a much bigger picture. Over the last 12 years, Georgia has put around $600 million into what they describe as a cargo beltway around Savannah. Rebuilding the I-16, the I-95 interchange, adding the Jimmy DeLoach Parkway, building an overpass over the Mason Mega Rail terminal, and upgrading key access roads. The Brampton Road Connector is the capstone that ties the loop of everything together. This is not an isolated project. It's the end of a very deliberate long-range move to build a port complex that can move serious volume without choking its own city. Now let's talk about why this road matters for operators. And we're going to start with the people who truly feel it first, drayage operators and carriers. Right now, Savannah's Garden City Terminal is doing about 14,000 truck gate moves a day. Every extra stop sign, every train blocking a crossing, every detour through a neighborhood, that's fuel burned, drivers' hours lost, and typically delivery windows missed, or at least squeezed. The Brampton Road Connector does three important things for operators. The first is it cuts friction on the first and last mile. Instead of sharing space with commuters and local traffic, trucks get a direct ramp onto I-16. How this breaks down is fewer unpredictable delays, especially at the rail crossings. 2, it protects driver utilization. In a world where hours of service and driver availability are constant constraints, a more predictable 8-mile run is real money. You're not going to see it on a billboard, but it will start to show up in the margins. 3, it supports higher sustainable throughput. As the port adds more capacity shipside, this connector removes the truck network as the bottleneck. Georgia Ports Authority CEO Griff Lynch put it very simply. He said, "Our trucking community will achieve faster turn times at the port, with safer routings inland, benefiting Savannah supply chain speeds." The thing to remember is that's the operator's view. But there is a second layer here that matters for strategy. Savannah has been positioning itself as the default East Coast gateway for the Southeast. It's already the fastest growing port on the U.S. East Coast, with container volumes up more than 12% in 2024 and another increase in 2025 hitting around 5.7 million TEUs. This road is about defending that growth and making sure the port's landside network doesn't become the constraint as Georgia Port Authority pushes towards 12.5 million TEU capacity targets set for 2035. To really understand what's happening in Savannah, you have to zoom out from this single road and look at their infrastructure stack. On the rail side, you've got the Mason Mega Rail Terminal. This is the largest on-terminal intermodal rail yard in North America, with 24 miles of track and the ability to lift up to 2 million TEUs a year. It's already handling roughly 42 double-stack trains per week to inland markets like Atlanta, Memphis, Nashville, and Charlotte. And in fact, it had a record year in 2025 with 591,000 containers moved by rail. On the port side, the Georgia Ports Authority is in the middle of a long build cycle. They have a $1.6 billion renovation of Ocean Terminal in Savannah, taking it from 200,000 TEUs to around 1.75 million TEUs of annual container capacity, with phase one scheduled to open in July of 2027. They also have a new Savannah container terminal on Hutchinson Island, expected to add around 3.5 million TEUs of capacity and 3 big ship berths around the end of the decade. Altogether, Georgia Port Authorities is targeting around 12.5 million TEUs of annual capacity by 2035, and that's backed by a $4 billion self-finance capital plan. And then there's the inland infrastructure. The Gainesville Inland Port in Northeast Georgia opened in May of 2026 as a rail-served terminal connecting directly back to Savannah. It's designed to scale up roughly 200,000 containers annually at full build out and aims to shift more freight off trucks and onto rail between Atlanta, Gainesville, and the port. So the Brampton Road Connector stitches together all of this. You've got a mega rail on the terminal inland ports feeding cargo in and out, berth capacity expanding, and now a cleaner, faster truck pipeline to I-16 and I-95. This is infrastructure used as a competitive weapon. Other East Coast ports are investing, but Savannah is combining roads, rail, inland ports, and terminal expansion in a very integrated way. For global shippers and network planners, that means two things. The first is Savannah isn't just adding cranes, it's adding reliability. The second is the risk of congestion shifts from inevitable to manageable, especially during demand spikes and tariff-driven front loading. Now we're going to pause on Savannah real quick, but we'll be right back. I just want to talk to you about FreightFA.com because this episode is brought to you by FreightFA and the Freight Flow Advisor, our AI-powered freight intelligence platform behind FreightFA.com. So here's the reality. When news like this drops, a new freight corridor or a port expansion, someone on your team has to answer the same questions fast. Those questions can look like, what does this do for our routing? Or does Savannah now beat our current East Coast gateway on cost and time? FreightFA is built exactly for those moments. With the Freight Flow Advisor chat, you can literally ask it questions based on these scenarios, and the system will combine market data, routing logic, and your own parameters to give you scenario-based cost estimates. We're not talking about benchmarks. You can actually compare port choices, lane combinations, and modes side by side with clear visibility into estimated transportation costs, transit time and dwell assumptions, exposure to specific ports, corridors, and tariff regimes. FreightFA is not trying to replace your TMS or your team. It's a decision layer you can use when the environment moves and you need a quick defensible answer for both leadership and your customers. So if you're listening to this and thinking we should really know what Savannah routing actually cost us versus our current default, go check out FreightFA.com. Again, that's FreightFA, your 24/7 analyst when the market doesn't sit still. All right, let's get back to Savannah. I want to widen the lens to a global supply chain and emerging market view. Over the last few years, we've had 3 overlapping trends. The first is tariff and trade uncertainty. 2025 and 2026 saw another wave of tariff noise. The second is nearshoring and regionalization, more sourcing shifting towards Mexico and the broader Americas, with manufacturers building in the U.S. Southeast to get closer to the demand. The third is East Coast versus West Coast rebalancing. After the pandemic, East Coast ports gained share as shipper diversified away from the single point West Coast exposure. And ports like Savannah rode that wave. Now, against that backdrop, Savannah's play is pretty straightforward here. Be the main Atlantic gateway for Southeast manufacturing and distribution. The interstate corridors connect Savannah to Atlanta, Tennessee, the Carolinas, and into the Midwest. It's important to note that as more auto, battery, and advanced manufacturing plants land in Georgia, Alabama, and Carolinas, the freight those plants generate wants the closest, most efficient port. Put together, when you combine a fast-growing port with 5.7 million TEUs, mega rail that reaches deep into the interior, inland ports like Gainesville that soak up truck miles, and now a dedicated highway that cleans up the truck side of the network, this is no longer just a port upgrade. It's a regional freight platform. For emerging markets, especially in Latin America, Savannah's improved reliability and capacity make it a more attractive endpoint for services looking to add or extend rotations. This is where infrastructure in one U.S. city starts to reshape trade lanes and sourcing patterns over a 5 to 10 year window. So to sum this all up, Savannah just finished a 12-year, $600 million land-side infrastructure build with the opening of the Brampton Road Connector. And it's layering that on top of a multi-billion-dollar port and rail investment. This is all about locking in a competitive position as the primary East Coast gateway. Looking ahead, here's what to watch for over the next 12 to 18 months. Measured improvement in truck turn times at the Garden City terminal, volume trends through late 2026, especially if there is tariff uncertainty. On-time delivery of Ocean Terminal Phase 1, which is due in 2027, and early signs of Hutchinson Island construction and permitting staying on track. Also, rail share growth as Gainesville Inland Port ramps and more cargo goes inland by train instead of by truck. If all of those pieces fall into place, Savannah isn't just catching up, it's on path to redefine the balance of power amongst East Coast ports. So listen, that's it for today. Make sure to share this with your colleague in global supply chain. If you want to dive deeper, head over to substack.com and search the Freight FA Brief, where we've curated an article for this episode. Make sure to follow us online at the Freight Flow Advisor on LinkedIn, Instagram, and Facebook. You can watch us on YouTube, and you can listen to this podcast on Apple and Spotify. Until next time, this has been your Freight Flow Advisor Brief.